Good afternoon. As promised, from the last video, I would make a follow-up video regarding the subject of store exclusivity for figures. So this particular video may be longer, mainly because I want to break it into parts or segments where I talk about the story of how I found this figure, the annoyances of store exclusive figures, and then the review portion where we can go into the aesthetics and why I like this figure, why it was worth hunting for, as all of us would probably relate to if we are invested in this hobby. So to begin with the story, this figure, when it was revealed as a Walmart exclusive, was one figure that I really wanted because I have always had a fondness for the Green Lantern characters, and I have never read the source material where he became corrupted by Parallax. I know very little of that, but for a character to just be on your shelf with your other Green Lantern figures and having these nice accessories like effect parts that you see right now in his hands, it just looks cool. And at that time, I haven't been to a Walmart in a long time, so I thought they would probably be stocked and probably have something, and I was wrong. I was quite wrong. This figure was not something I would find right off the bat. It took 13 Walmarts to track this down within the span of, I have to say, maybe a month or close to 2 months. I do not remember how active I was looking for this. All I know is that this particular figure was something that I was looking for. And on top of that, this was the only time when figures in this line had the gold label stamp of approval, as I like to call it, because on the box there would be this thing that says gold label collection. This was the way Mcfarlane would indicate what is considered a store exclusive and what is not a store exclusive. But there were also these store exclusives that existed in Target that did not have the gold label sticker, so it was very confusing. But all the Walmart ones had it. So he had it, the Azrael figure had it, which you saw in the last video, the one in the blue. These two were all Walmart exclusives, and eventually even the Dark Flash figure that came later was also a Walmart exclusive. And for a time period, Walmart got a lot of store exclusives that were pretty much like brand new figures that never existed in the line, or the versions that people really wanted of that particular character. So Target was getting mostly like repaints at the time, but what Target also had that Walmart didn't have was like a year-long build wave. So if we look back at the timeline of events during 2020, when everything was let me rephrase this. When everything was just not so great, as we all remember 2020 to be, there was a year-long build wave, and that was the Futures End build wave, and it was the Batman Beyond themed, so most of the characters are Batman Beyond figures. in that wave or related to him. And that was a build wave that was exclusive to Target. I didn't know about this at the time because when I got into the line, it was already like somewhat in or started already. So my exposure or my very first figure was sometime, I believe, in March or April. I do not remember, but it was well into the year. So I didn't know that there was all this going on. But after getting into the line and being slowly invested into it, we come to this figure when this was revealed. And that was when everything changed. Every time I had an excuse to go to Walmart, I always played this fun little game or a guessing game, let's just call it that, where would I find a gold label today? If I find a gold label today, that would be amazing. That would be like winning something, even though I have to pay for it. But every time I went to Walmart, I've never seen a gold label. Zero. I've never ran into one. It was quite rare. I would see other people see it. And hell, one thing that I saw that some people got lucky with was some people found this figure on clearance at Walmart. And that, I always was like, you guys are lucky. I don't know where you guys live, where it so happened that you have one on a peg that's on clearance. Let alone that is just like already a hard coincidence to have, right? You have figures going on sale, and then so happens that it's this figure too. There was one time that I did see the peg for this figure at a Walmart. Nothing. So, and I could be wrong with this, but to what I remember, these shipments for gold labels at Walmart's was like, the case were not like a full pack of 6 like Target. I think it was even less. But just the fact that store exclusives are technically supposed to be limited in quantity, because that's how I believe most of them are. That's why this figure is very hard to find. I don't know how other people had experience looking for this. I know some people were able to find it easily, and some were not able to find it at all. And for me, I got really fortunate with this, and it wasn't guaranteed. So if you go on Walmart's website, you can technically track which store has stock. It's a confusing site. The layout is so weird. I don't know if it can still do that. I think it can. I recently went on Target just to check if any Targets nearby had Fire, which is a recent character that came out for the Geekathon thing, if they had any of her in stock, and they did, but sometimes their information is misleading because they can say they have one in stock and then they don't actually have it in stock. Most of the time, the Target employees always tell me to just like call ahead of time, like call to find out if they do or don't. Which I never have called any of the stores to ask. And so I gambled with this particular Walmart, which is not that far from where I am. I will not say where this Walmart is for reasons. I want to keep where I am private, or where I live private. So I was on the site, and it said that this particular Walmart had one in stock. I took the gamble because this was the only sign I ever saw of one saying that it even had this Parallax Hal Jordan in stock. Every other time, I asked a Walmart employee at every other Walmart that I could go to, that somewhere a little bit further, but not too far. They would all tell me they wouldn't have it. Usually, you can just ask them by showing them the item number, and they would search it on their device. But this one, the store website said that they had one left. So when I got there, I was very hesitant because, this is just a funny gamble. Like, it might say that it has one, but it doesn't guarantee that it's there. They could have not updated yet, because sometimes when people buy things, I don't think they update right away. Sometimes they forget to change it. That's my assumption. But lo and behold, this 13th Walmart, the 13th Walmart that I have walked into after who knows how many how long it's been in this journey, it was sitting on the peg. It was not on sale, but I didn't even care because finding one was already hard enough. So this very figure was an adventure. I don't know if it was a good adventure, but it was one of the first time I've ever went looking for something and felt just sorrow. Like, it felt like joy and sadness at the same time, because you have this motivation to look for this, but every time you can't find it, it just puts this dent inside your motive, and you just how do I word this? You contemplate whether you want to continue searching for it. But I found it after that long. It was literally the first time I found a gold label ever in collecting this line. I've never found any gold label. This was the first gold label figure I ever found. And it is one of those stories that I tell to some of my friends sometimes, because they know I'm into this hobby. And this is one of those stories where I can never forget it, because this was the pain that I felt. I never felt so much pain looking for a figure. Well, there are other stories that comes later, but before this, I've never looked for figures in this manner. So this was the first time I felt so much suffering looking for something I wanted. And I can't forget it. I mean, it's just something that you look back on, and some people might say that, oh, this is so stupid. Why are you looking for something? Why waste your time looking for this one thing? It's like it's just an object. It doesn't do anything. It's like, but as someone who collects these figures and actually have joy collecting action figures from a certain franchise that made my childhood, there's a difference in how I view these things. Of course, from a logistical standpoint, yeah, it could. Some people might think this is stupid, that you're wasting all your time looking for this one thing. But to me, it's not really that stupid. It was worth it, because I eventually found it. Now, if I didn't find it, well, as I said before, with what happened with the other figure, there would have been that option. But would that have been a good option? No. I did not want to give up. So now that I've told my story about how I found this guy and why I really needed him on my shelf, or actually, no, let me explain that part. I've always loved Green Lantern characters. or the Green Lantern concept. The lore in Green Lantern is just rich. There's not, yeah, there was that movie that at the time we always think it was a really bad movie, but to me, looking back at it now, it wasn't really that terrible of a movie. There's been movies worse than that, but the story of Green Lantern, especially when you read the events of Blackest Night, that really was the mark that made me fall in love with the Green Lantern mythos, because Blackest Night is just one hell of a story. I recently got the Anumbis version of that book, and it is a thick, heavy, hardcover comic, and it's just every page is just printed with like that usual type of paper they use for graphic novels, but that book is just heavy, and it just looks like a giant textbook. That story changed the way I viewed this character, because before that, Green Lantern, the guy wears a green ring, makes up constructs. That kind of does sound kind of lame, right? To some people. It sounds like Superman or Batman using his intellect to like stop his villains. But the more I looked into it, I realized there's a whole span of stories with all these characters. It's not just Hal Jordan. There's stories about every other lantern, like significant lanterns. And eventually, when I watched that Green Lantern animated movie that came out a long time ago, it was First Flight. That was the animation origin of Hal Jordan's Green Lantern, like his version of Green Lantern. And it's still one of my favorite movies. And then the movie that came after that, before that 2011 live action Green Lantern movie, I believe it was called Green Lantern Emerald Knights. That movie sold these characters even more when you hear the stories of 6 other lanterns and how they became lanterns, especially the first Green Lantern. That story is still probably my most favorite one, because it talks about the foundation of the Corps and who were the first batch of like Green Lanterns that the Guardians pretty much scouted out. So that is why this character, or this figure, I just really need, because if you don't think of him as Parallax Hal Jordan, it still looks really cool as a version of Hal Jordan that could be wearing a cape, if you just want to imagine that. But this is Parallax Hal Jordan, so that is what this figure is. But if you want to be creative and not think of him in that light, you could. Now, is this figure completely perfect? What I was going to say. There's no such thing as a perfect figure. This figure has its flaws. It's got its problems, but I still think that this is one of my favorite figures that has come out. However, this is the thing that leads to the next topic of why I think store exclusivities can be an annoyance. And I want to go into this segment now, especially with what happens later with this figure. When you make certain figures exclusive to a certain store, whether it's Target, Walmart, GameStop, or even Amazon, right? Online store. It's the rate of how fast these things can sell out during the pre-order period, or the fact that even after the pre-order period, if it's out, it's just hard to find. And for me, or for my experience hunting DC Multiverse figures, especially those exclusive ones, Target has never been a pain for me. For some reason, Target has always been more generous. It's really weird. It's only recently that Walmart has been generous to me, because I never found 3 gold labels at Walmart back to back. That was a surprise. I didn't even expect that. But Target, for the longest of time, has always been quite generous when it comes to finding exclusives. And these are figures that I'll probably talk about in the future, or waves that I'll talk about in the future, in one video for each of them. But for example, you had the Crime Syndicate build wave, which was a year-long build wave where you build Starro. That was my first ever Target exclusive build wave that I've tackled into, and it was annoying to hunt for those figures. It wasn't like, easy, but at least it didn't feel like what it took to find this Hal Jordan, which is interesting. So, however, when the Flashpoint build wave came out, and that Flash figure released, I saw myself reliving almost what I was going through with this very Hal Jordan. So, from time to time, you get lucky, and then sometimes you just don't get lucky. And that's all I have to say about store exclusives. It's just an annoying thing sometimes. Sometimes they put the cooler looking figure as a store exclusive, and you're just screwed. You're like, oh, am I going to find this today? Probably not. Am I going to find it tomorrow? Maybe. It's all random. It's in terms of Amazon, which is like an online exclusive, like online store, not online exclusive, but Amazon exclusives for this line. What you really have to worry about with those, especially if they're like the ones you want, it's just the fact that they sell out in minutes because of scalpers and all those that exist that buy out all the stock if they can, and so they can resell it for higher value. That's pretty much the only problem with the online exclusives. So store exclusive figures in general, I think, are just a pain in the ass. And this concept is not new. This concept has been around for a long time. There have always been store exclusives for other lines before Mcfarlane's version of DC Multiverse. I believe Mattel's DC Multiverse probably had this too. I know Marvel Legends had Walgreens exclusive back in the day. I don't know if they still do today, but every figure line has their store exclusives, right? That they do it because they want to release a limited quantity and then make it harder for people to get copies of. I don't really get the incentive of it. I feel like it also makes it hard and unfair for most people, because everybody wants to get that figure if they're looking for it. And I feel like people should have a chance at getting it, and it shouldn't be locked to something. And this just opened the rabbit hole to another topic that I will save for the future, about other various things that have occurred in this line that makes it even more annoying to hunt for them or for those figures. In that regards, the Platinum Chase, which I will save for another video. So now that I got that out of the way, I can finally do the review portion for this figure. I apologize that this video is longer than the previous ones. I just had to tell my story. I had to just talk about my grievances with store exclusives. These videos are for me to remind myself the struggle of maintaining this hobby, both financially, of course, because these things are not cheap, you know, even if they're not over $100. Yeah, you collect a bunch of these and do the math, you will know how much you're spending on all these figures in total when you add it all up, and it's not a pretty number. But now that all that's out of the way, now I can finally look at this figure again. It's been a long time. Luckily, this figure did not have any quality control issues of any kind, because this was also during that period when a lot of Mcfarlane figures, you know, don't have an example of it, but the shoulder articulation piece right here would pop off, meaning that they were not glued correctly, or I don't know what happened in the factory. I just know that these figures, some figures had this problem where when you rotate it, it would just pop off. This figure doesn't have that problem. If it did, there's a way to fix that, which I learned later. I did not learn it at the time. If you use a little bit of super glue and just apply it to that peg on the figure, what you do is you let it dry. After you let it dry, then you sock it back into the socket of the arm of this piece, and it'll kind of make it tighter, and it'll still rotate, and it will not pop off. I didn't know this was a thing you could do. So I've had some figures that had that particular QC, and I applied that method, and it works for them, and that's kind of neat. So of course, when you're looking for something that's not easy to find, such as this guy right here, you don't want any QC problems with this at all, in terms of the articulation. Like paint QC, that is something that is unavoidable, unfortunately. But I can live with that. But if it's anything retaining the articulation of the arms, the legs, the hands, whatever, that's allows this figure to get into poses, that is the part that sucks. For anybody who collects action figures, this is the nightmare. Now, is it the end of the world? No, there's probably a way to fix it. And I've seen people be able to fix these type of problems. I haven't had to fix any of these issues for a majority of my figures, but if I ever had to, it would have to be mainly just this problem that I was talking about. So that's something I just want to mention, because this was during that period where certain figures had this problem. So it was a running quality control issue. It's kind of, I haven't seen problems like this in a long time. So yeah. Now I'm gonna take this off, because let's take a look at him before we look at those nice little accessories and talk about the good and the bad. So he's one color, he's entirely green. He has a lot of these lines, as you can see. It's just very similar to the Nightfall. So much lines. I don't know when this guy was created, like the concept of Parallax Hal Jordan, but it probably might have been made in the same period, I suppose. You have these nice silver, or not silver, but like gray painted stripes. It looks kind of messy over here, but there's that. And then you have his cape, which looks like the same cape that Superman has, but repainted green. So Wow, my table is not stable, and I don't actually mind if that just happened. I might need to look into how to tightening up this table. But little accidents like that will happen. I apologize for that, but that was quite interesting. As I was saying, he has his cape. I'm having so much fun just having these little hiccups happen in these videos. It actually makes the videos more fun for me when I do have hiccups, because I'm not good at this. This is like my, what is third? No, fourth video now. So yeah, not new. Still getting a hang of this. So I need to be very careful with this setup that I got going on. All right. So another thing that they didn't really do good or accurate with is, in a lot of pictures when you see this guy's hair, it's supposed to be kind of white right here, like he has white hair, and it's brown. I don't know why this one ended up having more of just black hair. And this is where I will go into this in the future when we talk about the very thing they did after this. So when I talk about store exclusive figures that are online, I will mention this now because this is related to this figure. They re-released this figure as a glow-in-the-dark repaint with the right hair color. So that kind of rubbed me the wrong way, but I wasn't shocked that this was happening, because this was starting to become a thing in the later half of like 2023 all the way to now. There's been a lot of repaints. It was a re-release for him, and I don't have that figure out right now because I'm going to talk about the figure in another video. It really irked me in a way where, what was the point of going to those Walmarts if I knew they were going to do this? Or at the time, I didn't know they were going to do this. But once that pattern of repaints began, I always felt that there is a chance that this guy might get a glow-in-the-dark. Because one, glow-in-the-dark works for Green Lanterns, because they do glow when they're in their Green Lantern costume, right? So, lo and behold, it happened. He made it. He announced it. He revealed it. It was not that long ago that glow-in-the-dark came out. I believe it was this year. I think it was this year when I got it. Or last year. I don't remember. I do not remember when. It was very recent, though. It's not that old. And they painted the hairlines correctly. Now, that figure, I do have gripes with. It's not completely perfect. There are certain paint jobs that they've done on this particular version that I prefer over that figure. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit. For example, these hands are translucent green on the glow-in-the-dark version, which you will see later on when I do talk about that whole glow-in-the-dark. I think that video will be where I talk about repaints. You see a lot of the areas that are green are painted where they're supposed to glow in the dark, and then they don't stand out. So for this version, because he doesn't glow in the dark, these hands are like my favorite hands that they've ever made, because it's like transparent plastic mixed with like regular plastic. Looks really cool. So aesthetically, he has this really cool look to him. I like the abdomen region because he has a six-pack, so it's like he's buff. His legs, he's wearing leg armor. I don't really know what these are. This is part of the design. But overall, he's just wearing a really cool design for a costume. So that is what he looks like overall. And aesthetically, he just looks cool. He looks nice. If you don't really want to call him a Parallax Hal Jordan, you could probably think of him as like an alternate Hal Jordan that dons a costume like this. You know, you can make up your own imagination. In terms of his accessories, he comes included with these effect pieces, and when I was looking for them, I had to make sure these were his, because sometimes I get them confused with the glow-in-the-dark ones, but those ones are like brighter. And how I know these were his was because when you peg them on, the size of the holes are different for each hand. They look the same, but one hole is wider and one hole is shorter or smaller because the gripping hand, yes, he has a gripping hand for one of the accessories, and then he has a fist hand. It was a missed opportunity to give him another fist hand, which should have been included. They gave him the gripping hand because, of course, you cannot have a Green Lantern figure without the good old Green Lantern. So he can hold this in his hand, but he doesn't really grip it in a really good way, so I don't really usually have this on him. And this is a very nice accessory to come with. Instead, the accessory that I always have him with, it doesn't come with this figure. It came later. This figure came later in the release schedule with a Build-A-Figure wave. This sword is included with the Kyle Rayner figure, and I just like that the green on this matches the green on his hands, so when he's gripping it, it looks like he just created this purely out of the energy in his body without like using a ring. But of course, the context of the story is that he has many rings in his hands. I don't know if the rings are visible on his fingers. I'm trying to get a look. No, I don't see anything like that. It's been a while. Yeah, they don't exist. So those are all his accessories. In terms of his articulation, you have the standard head rotation. I'm gonna bring this closer. He can look up, kinda. He can look down. His arms can do the T-pose. He can lift it up, go all the way. I'm not gonna get him through that because of the armor. He has double jointed articulation. It could be very stiff sometimes. His hands has this joint. It can rotate all the way. So same thing with this arm. It can do the same thing pretty much, essentially. He has a upper diaphragm. I think that's what we call this now. I think that's what this is called. That can rock back and forth, go side to side, rotate. He has a lower waist rotation, which is very loose, by the way. Not completely loose, but can he ab crunch? Kinda. Can he arc his... Yes, he can arc all the way back. That's crazy. His legs can kick out, and he can do the splits, and his legs can bend all the way, double jointed, but they don't really touch. So there's that. His feet can go out. It uses the ball peg. This was before they started using sculpted pegs, but there should be a rocker, but mine is really stuck in there. So Of course, you have the toe articulation. So, articulation, quite standard on a Mcfarlane figure. Good enough for a figure like him. And this also, it just feels fun to fidget with from time to time. He has this very different body mold that when this was introduced, same thing, no other figure reused this until later, and that'll be a whole different story when I talk about all that other subjects. This video is already 40 minutes long, so I didn't mean to make it this long, but I might as well make this a podcast at this point. But yeah, so that is the figure for Parallax Hal Jordan. And regarding the other figure from the other video, these two were revealed almost in a similar time frame, which is why finding one of them was already like a pain in the ass. I believe it was August when this guy was revealed. I saw the photo of him, and I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to find him. I can't even find this guy. So I believe it was August. I spent most of August looking for this figure, if I'm trying to remember right. Or maybe I found him already, and then August came. August came, and then you had this Azrael Batman. I'm just gonna leave him there. So yeah, so, and I did not want to relive going to all those Walmarts again. I really did not want to suffer again, so I gave up like that, like at a snap of a finger, like Daniel snapping his finger. I was just like, no, I do not want to suffer. So this is my grievances with store exclusives, especially with Walmart. Some people have better luck at Walmart, some people don't. And I am one of those people who have it on and off, as I like to say. So if I had to say which figure I'm happy that I found for regular price, it would honestly be this one. Like, thank goodness that at least I didn't have to spend, you know, 60, 70 for this as well. Like, that would have just been crazy. And speaking of this figure, I saw him at Frankincense, and I just, out of curiosity, asked that seller how much he was selling this Parallax Hal Jordan for, and they were like $80, and I'm like, ugh, $80? No, I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna spend $80 on this. I really don't want to spend $80 on this. You could probably buy an import figure with $80, you know? So, or do other things with $80 that doesn't have to relate to buying an action figure. It's a lot of money. You know, I still feel a little bit guilty spending like $60 on this. So, but I feel guilty spending money on this hobby in general. Because it's not a cheap hobby to have. Let's just say that. So, and with that, I'm just going to end this video. I hope that this video was informative in some ways regarding to my experience with store exclusive figures and what I think about store exclusive figures in general. There will be more to this topic because this is like a growing thing that, you know, eventually it moved away from just Walmart and Target, right? It expanded when it came to this DC Multiverse line from Mcfarlane. So that'll be a whole different video, or yeah. So With that, I do apologize that this video is like now 44 minutes long, or 45 minutes long about to be. I did not intend for it to be this long, but since I'm still relatively new, I just can't time myself, and I just love to ramble on and on and on, as you can tell. So, if you stuck around for this long, if anyone watches this, I appreciate you, and I hope that you continue to stick around for the next videos that I do. I am thinking about other figures that I want to review, such as the Bane that I keep showing in the other two videos. That particular version of Bane. So when it happens, it will happen. With that, have a good day, and I'll see you next time.